Currently, global investors are sitting on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, where top participants are discussing the ways to reboot the global economy under the pandemic conditions. Apart from that, traders take into account the economic calendar. Let's watch a video calendar on InstaForex TV channel to find out what economic data is due in the last 2 days of the week. Traders are ready for a busy economic calendar with a focus on statistics from the United States. Tonight, investors will have an opportunity to evaluate the current conditions and prospects of the US economy. The Federal Open Market Committee is to unveil its decisions following the 2-day meeting on monetary policy. On Thursday, January 28, market participants will get to know a batch of economic data. The US will release a preliminary GDP data for the fourth quarter. Analysts certainly foresee a notable slowdown in the United States economic output in the final 3 months of 2020, following a surge in the third quarter. However, investors could be discouraged by subdued economic growth of 4.2%, which comes as a result of lockdown measures to contain the pandemic spread and slow progress in the mass vaccination. So, with such a negative response, the market could see sell-offs of the US dollar. As usual, on Thursdays, traders monitor weekly updates on both initial and continuing unemployment claims. Analysts expect continuing jobless claims to remain above the psychological level of 5 million last week. To make things worse, the number of first-time applications for pandemic unemployment still logs significant growth. On Friday, Germany's Federal Statistical Agency will report on the labor market. Experts at Die Statis are likely to report that the number of layoffs increased by 10,000 in January. At the same time, the unemployment rate is expected to remain the same at 6.1%. Another report on investors' radars on Friday is Germany's preliminary gross domestic product. The economy of the largest EU economy is projected to have eased to minus 4% in annual terms. The steady contraction in the national output is sure to arouse concern among investors that is bearish for the single European currency. On Friday, the US dollar again will have no excuse for its growth. It seems that the European and American currencies are going to compete for weakness. Another reason for sell-offs of the US dollar could become a report on personal spending in the United States during the period of Christmas sales. Traditionally, consumer activity reaches a peak in December. However, December of 2020 is an exception. Consumer spending is expected to go deeper on the negative territory. The indicator could have contracted 0.5% on December, month on month. Importantly, consumer spending accounts for the 2/3 of the US gross domestic product, so the fresh metric will deal a blow to the US dollar, causing its further retreat across the board. You were watching Forex Trader Calendar on InstaForex TV channel. We wish you profitable deals with InstaForex.